In this presentation, I'll demonstrate how to use data grids in POBITS. Just about every database application uses a couple of fundamental presentation concepts. One is a list and the other is a form. The form is generally called up from the list to see the detail of the record displayed in the list. POBITS has many such lists throughout the application, and we will refer to them as grids. And a grid is a grid. It has rows and columns. The rows are a record and the columns are the fields within the record. Let me show you some of the features that are available in just about every grid within the POBITS application. For starters, you can sort based on the column header. So by clicking on any column header once, you'll be able to sort it, and the little sort indicator shows you that it's being sorted, and in this case being sorted from lowest to highest. Clicking again reverses the sort, and now you can see it is sorted from highest to lowest. That's true for all columns, so you can sort on any column. You cannot do multiple sorts or combined sorts. You can only sort on one column at a time. Another thing you can do with columns is you can move them around and reorganize them to suit your purposes. So by clicking on a column, as I'm doing here, you can simply drag it to the position you want to put it and release. And now you can see I've put the first name in front of the last name because I like it better that way, so that's how I'm going to do it. So that's a great feature. You can organize your columns any way you like, and you can sort them to suit you. The other thing you can do is you can filter. Right away, there are filters available here. These little entry boxes at the top of the column are filters, and you can either select values where that's appropriate to do. You can select a value, or you can type directly into a field and press enter to get a sort. Before I do that, let me explain about sorting. It's a correction about filtering. Filtering is also available from the drop-down widget right there on the right-hand side of the column. And here you can see the numerous filter operators. So if there's something very specific you want to do with a filter, you can use this filter drop-down to select the exact filter operator that you want to use. Understand that by default, the default filter operator is typically starts with. So by typing the first few letters of anything that might be in your column, you'll get that. So let's type LIN here, and you can see right on the screen what that's likely to bring, and it does. So that filters us down to everything that starts with LIN, in this case the Linda person, and now we have filtered it. Note that you can compound filters. I could filter on more than one item at a time. For example, I could filter on, let me get that, filter on male, so I can see just the males. Let me make sure I'm actually getting that here. So let's filter on males, and let's filter only on those whose status is active. Okay, so now I have filtered down my list to only males and only those whose status is active. So you can compound filters, and you can add at least one sort criteria. You can move the columns around. You can also resize the columns, and this will come in handy if you've got a smaller monitor than you'd like to have. You might have to scrunch things up a little bit so that you can fit the most possible columns in there for your needs. So after you have a grid configured as you like it, you want to save it so that every time you come back to this grid, it'll be configured that way for you. And to do that, you go up to this little tool in the toolbox area. You can see when I hover over it, it says Save Current Grid Settings. So we do that, and in Google Chrome anyway, you're going to get a little dialog that tells you that it's been saved. And so now if I were to come back into this grid, if I logged out or anything, it would come back and set to that configuration. You notice that I did put the first name in front of the last name. So when I reset the window, this is replicating as if I were just logging onto the system. So you can see it has saved my grid configurations for me. and now that's how it's going to be configured until I either change the configuration or reset it to the defaults, which you do with this little tool right here. The little redo button or undo button restores the grid to the default. And so if I do that, and I get a little dialog from Chrome, now I don't see it right away, but where I have first name first and last name last, and if I reset the window, then we're going to see a refresh of the grid, and the grid comes up, and now it's got last name first and first name last because it set itself back to the configuration that we put into it at design time. Now lastly, you can go in and add any columns that you want. So on any of the column headers, you can go to the columns, and then you can see all of the available columns, and the ones that are checked are the ones that are currently in view. So let's say we like to see that photo picture here in our list, so let's add that, and you can see it immediately gets added to the list. And so now we'll use a couple of different concepts we've already seen. We'll drag that to the beginning, put that over here, we'll scrunch it up a little bit so it doesn't take up as much room. And now we've got our grid configured the way we want. Notice a little bit of dead space over here, and you don't have to spend any time trying to eliminate that dead space, because what I'll do now is I'll save the grid, and then I'll refresh the window. And what the system will do is it will refresh this grid, it will leave everything in the configurations that you wanted, and it will use up any dead space by just making other columns a little bit wider so that your grid is always filled and using all of the screen, and all is good there. So those are the fundamentals of the different ways you can configure the grid. The last couple of things I'll show you is exporting the information from the grid. Most grids will have these two little tools right here. The first one is to display in printer friendly format, which essentially takes everything that's in your grid and produces it into an HTML layout. And HTML is important because you're going to actually see the photos in here. So if you have information like that in your grid and you just want to be able to print this off, that would be the way to do it. The other item is export to CSV. Most people recognize that as a comma separated values file compatible with Microsoft Excel. And I'll go ahead and open that. It's really just a text file. You could open it in Notepad, and you can see everything that's in it. And right away you see there's a lot of binary data in here, and what that is really, that's your photo coming down in one of the columns. And so if I were to even say wrap that text in there, so you see that all this is the photo data that's been delivered into the CSV file as pure binary data and pretty much worthless. So just understand that you're going to see that kind of thing if you put a photo into your list or anything like that. Easy enough to delete, and now you've just got the basic information from the grid. And if you need something done in Microsoft Excel, if you want to play around with the data or do some manipulation of it, that's a great export to use. So that's been a full overview of all of the features that are available in almost every single grid in the POBITS system. I encourage you to go through it, and as you're working, configure the grids the way you like them to be, and if you need to add columns or delete columns, do that, and then just use your little save button to save the grid for the next time you come in. When you do that, you're saving it just for you. It's a personal setting just for you, not for anybody else, and so you can manipulate them to serve you the best way possible so that you can be as productive as possible in POBITS.